Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's RWSN member organization workshop. Thank you very much for joining. We'll just give it 1 or 2 minutes as people are joining us, but hopefully by now you're all sufficiently familiar with how these things work. For those that don't know me, my name's Sean Fury. I'm the director of the RWSN Secretariat based in SCAT Foundation in Switzerland, and I'm really excited about today's topic, which you chose as member organisations. So we're very excited. This is kind of very different format to our public webinars. This is much more kind of intimate gathering of people and organisations around a common topic of common interest. So please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat box, which you should all have access to. And while you're doing that, I will just give an overview of the agenda. So I'm just welcoming you here to this event, and I just want to say a few notes of thanks and a bit of information about RWSN member organization membership. And then I'm delighted that we're joined today by our chair, Dr. James Origa from the World Bank in Kenya, who'll give us some opening remarks. And then we've got three fantastic presentations on today's topic from different perspectives. So we've got inputs from Oxfam representing Agenda for Change, from Business Connect, and from Aduma. And then the idea is that will kind of give us some food for thought, food for discussion, and then the second half of this hour is really kind of open floor discussion around the topics of the financial sustainability and business models and the financing of rural water supplies. But first, I just want to acknowledge some of the organisations that have registered for this event. So from our executive committee members and theme leader organisations, we have representatives that are hopefully joining us today from the World Bank and UNICEF, GRET, Samavi, and Water Mission. And they're instrumental in being the engine of RWSN as a network. So huge thank you to them for their inputs throughout the year. Then we are also joined today by several silver member organizations: 1001 Fontaines, COVA, Global Action Aid Network in Canada, Green Empowerment, Practica, Safe Water Network, WAVE, and Uptime Global. And we'll talk a little bit about that, what being a silver member is. And then we're also joined by quite a few people today who've registered from some of our bronze member organizations. So thank you very much for that. So before we get going, just to explain what I mean by silver and bronze. So as we're kind of developing as a network and really being a global hub for rural water supply, we really want to be as much driven by what you, our members, want to see. And the best way to do that is having member organizations. So we have 3 tiers in our current sort of constitution. At the gold level are kind of those that want to, it's got some automatic movement, for organizations that would like to contribute significantly financially, but not necessarily get actively involved day to day. Silver members are those that contribute a financial dues every year, and to be honest, it's that funding that it enables us to run events like this. So the more members we have at this tier, the more kind of events and services we can provide directly for members. So that's why we're really appreciative of silver members. But we don't want to gatekeep everything and just keep things behind closed doors. So that's why we have the bronze tier, which gives accessibility to some of the events and some of the networking opportunities that we offer for no cost. Anyway, enough about that. I would now like to, I didn't put the slide in here, so I'm going to just pop back to the agenda and hand the floor over to James to give us some opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So thank you guys for joining. As Sean has mentioned, my name is James Origa. I am joining from Nairobi, where I'm based. I'm a water specialist with the World Bank Africa East Unit. I work on a couple of our operations in Kenya, Somalia, and Tanzania. I'm also privileged to be representing the bank, the World Bank Water Department, in the executive committee and currently chairing the committee on behalf of the bank. I'm pleased really to make a few opening remarks. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this really important event, financial viability and business models in rural water supply. I mean, these are words that will resonate with all of us and will come up many times. I think today's theme speaks directly to the heart of a persistent challenge, ensuring that rural water services are not only available, but they are functional, they are professionally done, and they are financially sustainable. I'm certain I'd be preaching to the choir, not to the converted, when I say that despite many decades of investments in infrastructure, we still really continue to see a persistent state of high non-functionality in raw water systems. And we all reckon that this is not just a technical failure of infrastructure. It's a systemic failure of an entire ecosystem of service delivery chain. Most of us, maybe not all of us, appreciate that the largely predominant community management model, while very well intentioned and well meaning, has often placed to me, very unrealistic burdens on beneficiaries and community users. It has led to inefficiencies, iniquities, and for the most case, a troubling erosion of trust and accountability. When you place unrealistic burdens on, really not technically competent individuals as the utility service providers, over time, the service levels doesn't match up users' expectations, and it erodes a lot of trust and accountability. I think we all need to agree to move beyond expecting communities to bear the full weight of a very complex, in most cases, service delivery chain without adequate and sufficient technical backstopping to them. We, as practitioners, organizations working in this space, we owe it to ourselves to hold ourselves to higher duty of care, accountability of a duty of care of not leaving this headache to very ill-equipped communities when we exit the scene, because for the most part, MDBs, the World Banks, the NGOs, we are temporary partners in this space and we'll exit at some point. I think we should act in such a way that when we exit, we are careful to leave, the communities at a better place. Discussions like the one we are going to have today, to me, is a call for collaborative systems thinking. We need to embrace systems thinking, recognizing that rural water services are part of a dynamic, interconnected system. Technical fixes alone, providing more spare parts, more trainings to ill-equipped communities, will not solve the problem. It really has to be handled from a systemic, system where the government takes the lead and other partners complement the government as leaders and the primary duty bearers. And most importantly, the private sector should be strategically engaged, not just as contractors, but really in terms of long-term partners for service delivery and performance management. I believe that rural water services will benefit a lot, from adopting, designing for adaptation and learning. Over the many years of my practice in rural water supply, I have really come to appreciate that policies are a hypothesis, not cast in stone. kind of perpetual motion machines. We try models, we test them, we learn from them, and we adapt based on real world feedback. So, and I think that the point of today's conversation is really to learn and adapt from what is the feedback that is coming from the experiences, from different that. And from that feedback, we build better monitoring, better performance-based funding, some more structured technical backstopping mechanisms to support, service providers over time. Today's speakers will share insights from different countries and market-driven approaches that really challenge us to think differently. So I want to encourage all of you to ask questions, to share experience, and let's really, really learn from the feedback that you're getting from the practices here. So thank you very much for being here and for your commitment for transforming rural water services from the different parts of the world where you are coming from. So that's the much I would want to say, and then hand it back to Sean and team to continue guiding us through the presentation. Thanks, Sean. Back to you.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that sets the scene really nicely. So now we will go to the first presentation, which I'll just share the screen. And from Anjil Dikari from Oxfam, Nepal. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, myself, Angela Adhikari, team lead for WAS and water governance in Oxfam, Nepal. So Oxfam has been working in rural water supply system for the last 10 years. During the process, we learned that the water supply systems in Nepal were scattered, like even 10 households having their own management as a community management model. So we looked at the opportunity, can we make it viable? So we, in the process of working at business at scale, we integrated all those water supply systems as bundled them into a one utility. And the model has recently been documented by Ministry of Water Supply as the best practice of the country. And I'm here to present one key learning that we had in the process, that is integrating political economy in rural water supply business planning and why it's important. So next slide, please. Okay, I don't know.
Something seems to have happened to the
Yes, something
formatting of
seems
your
to have
slides.
happened.
So
Yeah.
let me just, if you want to keep on talking, I will
Yes,
go to
I will
your
keep on
original
talking.
slide deck and
Sure.
and try and bring that up.
Yeah, I'll keep on talking. So basically, business plan tells you the financial gap for the utility, but when the decision is about how do you fulfill that financing gap, that's when we learn that things get political. So how do you finance the gap? That's when the politics was a bit higher. So we presented a costed business plan. Shall I wait, Son, or shall
Nearly there, nearly there. Sorry
Okay.
about this.
No problem. It's okay.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, I'm just opening your original slide deck now. There we go. Right. Okay. So share screen 2. Full screen. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So
Great.
can we go on the
Excellent.
second? Yes. Can you go on the third slide? Yeah. So so we presented the costed business plan in front of the politicians in two different areas. We were working on the flatlands, also on the hills, on different utility. So we presented the costed business plan with an interactive tool that you can see on the right side, where the politicians themselves could play around and check, okay, what happens if we increase the tariff by 10%, 20%? What happens if we increase the grant or capex, manex, and opex costs? So based on that, we linked it with the financial viability to help them themselves understand how each thing affected the business plan and the utility viability. So the final outcome of the workshop was that everyone agreed that yes, the utility needs income, and it has to be regular. Next slide, please. Then we showed them the stream of the way they could generate the finance for the utility. It could be by increasing tariff, by increasing the service coverage, the grant, as well as reducing the expenses, and really showing them how sensitive each of these sections are, each of these paths are to the break even or financial viability. Next slide, please. So when we did that, the immediate reaction of everyone was that let's talk about the other option, but not increasing the tariff. The reason was not because the politicians, the leaders, uh, did not want the utility to survive, but somewhere they knew that cheaper water is means easy voting, and increasing tariff would mean they might lose the election. So next slide, please. That's when two unique things happened. In hills, where the access is a bit of a challenge, and they don't have other alternatives on other time of the year. The mayor of the local government, who also supports the utility, said that I may not be able to increase the tariff, but I'll try to work in other areas where I can bring in more funds. That is, I'll increase your more funds to build more service infrastructure so that you will have more customer base and increased income. I'll coordinate with the provincial and the federal government to bring more transfer fund to help you increase your service coverage. And then he regulated the ad hoc distribution of pipes, which was a culture on, like trying to more impress more customers. So what we saw is that while utility sees every individual as a customer, the service authority sometimes also see them as a voter. So that's where there is a bit of a difference in the way they see. And with this action, in this specific part of the area, there was 90% in tariff collection increment, and the service utility that we had established grows to 40% service coverage in just 2 years. While in the other side, next slide, please. While in the flatland, where we presented the same business plan through using the same tools, and the same emotion there as well, that okay, we can't increase the tariff, but instead of investing on the service coverage, what the mayor did was that they said, okay, I won't be able to increase the tariff, but I'll provide you maybe 70% of your operation cost through a grant. As a result, the tariff collection was very low and the service coverage could not be expanded. Next slide, please. So what that basically happened is that, same business plan as a tool for financial viability presented to the two politicians, I mean, the group of politicians who directly impacted the decisions in that locality. But they came up with two different financing paths. One helped build a bit of a long-term revenue, while other created more dependency, while the other one also looked like, okay, they are providing in the form of grant. So what that basically means is when we are building a business plan in the rural water supply system, we should be aware of the political economy as well. It's not just the business plan that helps you identify the gap. It's also the political economy that shapes the path that politicians choose, which may in longer term impact the sustainability and the financial viability of the utility. Next slide, please. So then what do? We learned that the best strategy was to start negotiating on the tariff 1 year after election. That is when the political resistance is less. In the context of my country, the election happens every 5 years. So when this resistance is less, we found it's a bit easier to negotiate with the decision makers. And if we blend that, when we make that decision on a tariff, if we can blend that with incremental tariff, but also kind of, like tagged with visible service improvement, then there is an easy acceptance from the customer as well. Okay, we have already agreed it's 10%, it's a 5% increment in tariff every year. And then they find it a bit easier to also convince them. And the third one is also to keep increasing the, like transfer, basically means from federal and provincial finance, which actually increases the tariff, increases the income of the utility. So in our experience, by using all this strategy, we were able to establish a utility and then raise the income from almost $100 a month to $3,000 a month. So this is our experience, and I wanted to share that while the business plan will tell you financing gap, it's politics that will define the financing path, and it's very critical that we think of political economy while designing the financial viability of rural utility. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and I think really illustrates one of the rare presentations, I think, about talking about politics, the politics of real water supply in a very practical, not a theoretical sense. So that's really great. Let me just move back to the other presentation, which hopefully does not have formatting issues. And so and it does. So hang on. No, it's better. So our next speaker is Jerome Lambert from Business Connect, who is going to tell us about financial viability and business models. So,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll say good afternoon, good evening, good morning around the world. I lead a social enterprise called Business Connect. We work in just over 80 countries. We're celebrating our 15th year this year, doing water and wash solution providing around the world in a social enterprise and a market driven approach. And so we really look at those markets. And I just kind of want to go through that. Today I want to share a framework of where we are in as we've emerged in this work, as we've come into this. We by no means claim to be success, in 80 countries, but through this we're learning. And I guess I'll start with saying I'm just honored to be here, be a part of this group to talk about this subject, because financial viability is a part of where we started at. And where we continue to learn in to be financially viable as a social enterprise, as a company that has a payroll and at the same time wants to really supply into the sector. So you can go to the next slide. Starting this out, we all know we've all been in this space. We all know the big number of the 2 billion lack safe drinking water in their home, but as we get into those numbers, what we've really dug into is there's also the other number that is, 600 million people live far below the poverty line, live at $2 a day or less around the world. That poverty line, that aid, that support, the governments, the NGOs that come alongside that group will always be there. The financial solutions there are a different conversation. And coming alongside of those groups is important, and financial viability for that group is, I love the start of the political conversation, the tariff conversation, a lot of that aid support. But there's this 1.4 billion, market ready, that have some means to pay, that have some means or ability to drive a market forward. And we find that it's not so much affordability for that group, it's access for that group. We talk about supply access, solutions and technology access, to have the supply chains there for them, that they're able to purchase, that they're able to put their solution to water, their solution to safe water in their own hands, is an access issue. So the market is there, the consumers are there. So if you move to the next slide. So what we've done is built this framework solution for us, where we've broken out kind of 3 channels that we work in deliberately. For a long time, we kind of bundled everything together in this, one distributor, people in country kind of manage all of it. We've really found that by separating them very intentionally, but also having them overlap, was really key for us. So institutionals, the foundational partnerships, with governments, with NGOs, it's essential part of reaching the last mile. It's an essential relationship that you have, and supplying them at the right prices, at the right abilities to come alongside of them in a subsidized way. Distributors, on the other hand, really moving towards empowering local entrepreneurs, building the systems for them, building the avenues that they can have a business, to create the supply chain, to create the access to those essential resources. They can create local wealth, they can create local capacity through training, and those distributors are specifically reaching the consumers and supplying them at a wholesale basis, supplying them at a basis where there is wealth and finance viability for those individuals in country. And then the third that really is exploring and expanding in the last 5 years and every year is this digital space, meeting customers directly on platforms. For us as a product supplier in the water space, whether it be Jumia in Kenya, Takealot in South Africa, Mercado Libre, Amazon, wherever that space is, meeting the customer where they are, meeting them with digital currency, wherever that is. But that has given us a direct access to kind of that customer focused channel, getting intentionally into the mission focused work of the people on the ground that need it, that have it. And so being able to go directly to consumer, has been really important for us to be able to gauge their appetite for spending, gauge the product cost analysis for us and the margins, and where this all translates out to is the market funds the mission. So I'll give you a really good example as this gets granular. P&G purifier of water, the simple sachet that we provide around the world. P&G has done this for years, but being able to sell it in a U.S. economy, for say in an outdoor space, or in South America where there's outdoor space and there's a margin, product cost analysis says that we can, one sachet we can get around 50 cents to $1 for, where in this institutional channel, in this aid communities, we're able to use that margin and give a discount to retail of 95% discount into those other areas. And we can leverage those markets, where there's 96, 97% margin on a product, to then be able to give that aid in a whole other market and use those funds for that market to subsidize, with even within one country like South Africa, we're able to provide tablets that clean JoJo tanks and provide safe water. In a retail basis, one tablet is about 35 cents, but in a subsidized manner, we also provide those at a deep discount that they're about 10 cents, 5 cents a tablet, depending on the region. And so being able to utilize that market, utilize that margin market to fund the mission is really key for us to be able to be financially viable. There has to be a consumer. And if you can go to the next slide here. In closing, for me, it is the framework we've built at Business Connect that is customer centric. At the end of the day, we want to bring the supply to individuals, to anyone that needs safe water. All of us need that, and it's done at different levels and supplied different levels. But there is the consumer centric market that then will fund the mission of reaching the bottom of the pyramid. It will fund the mission of reaching everybody with safe water and meeting that SDG 6 goal. We have to have funds to be able to do that. And those funds come from a market approach that's consumer centric. So thank you for the time, and just again, honored to be here and honored to learn from this discussion, because this is, for us, this is our mission of creating hope through business, that there's market and business solutions to poverty, to the needs of the world.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's really great. Thank you. That's another great perspective, and that issue of cross subsidy, which is so vital. Great. So for our last presentation before the discussion, I'd like to hand over to Alinta at Aduma.
Hello. Yes, so I will discuss a few more on I'll do some figures. So just quickly, you can go to the next slide, Sean. It's Aduma operates in 5 different countries, so mostly in West Africa, Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Benin, and we do some things in Uganda now. But where we really operate our model is in West Africa. We have different types of infrastructure, so we do manual pumps, we do small solar stations and large pipe networks. And I wanted to share with you today the results of a financial analysis that we did with Open Capital. So most of our data is with Mali and Burkina Faso. So we shared basically all our data and financial data mostly. and to see if what they can, and they did a financial analysis on these numbers. And I think this is one of the major things as an operator. We have a lot of data, and I think many of you are among them. But we are very focused mostly on our business, and therefore the really analysis of all those data that we have is a bit on the background. So this was a great opportunity for us, and that's what I want to share with you. Yes, you can go next, Sean. So do another one again, because then I see it all together. Okay, so I show here the results with result-based financing and without result-based financing. This is first all our data from Burkina Faso. In Burkina Faso, we operate mostly large water networks. So these are bigger piped systems, like a few hundreds of household connections and public standpipes. So this is also the country where for the first time we actually made a little bit of profit in Burkina. And this was mostly with, you see that with result-based financing, we did manage to get the net operating margin and also a gross margin that was positive, whereas without, it was a lot more difficult. But this was quite a positive picture. Obviously, this is something where we could really build on. And then we have the next slide. We have the data from Mali, where we mostly operate solar water stations. So these are small systems with only one public standpipe or maybe two, and manual pumps. Well, this was a lot less positive, and we basically made a lot of loss on both systems. So Mali is one of our more difficult countries. Despite having a lot of infrastructure, it's very hard to make a profit both with and without result-based financing. So where this has led us, so if you go to the next slide, we had a few conclusions, and that's what I wanted to discuss with you. So like I said, in Burkina, we generated a net profit for a few years from 2019 to 2021, and then we had a large hit with insecurity in Burkina, which affected our profitability. But it did show, but I think we're also slowly getting out of that as well. So I hope this year we'll again get to a net profit. But it did show that big O&M contracts, because Burkina is very well organized, we have a lot of contracts there, and we have large water networks. At scale, you can make a net profit on it. But then if you look at it for solar and manual pumps, even though they have a positive gross margin, they are so significantly loss-making in the end, if you do all the calculations on the net operating margins. And this is also how we came to the conclusion that the combination, you need scale, you need cross-subsidies for more profitable systems, you need to have impact-focused result-based financing, and they're really necessary for a sustainable model. And then we came to the conclusion was, okay, we will need to improve our profitability, because in the end, donor funding, grants, result-based financing even, they're not necessarily stable forever. So in the end, we still aim to make sure that this financing gap that was nicely mentioned before is at least closed as much as we can. And we've seen in Burkina that there are possibilities to get there. So that's why we were thinking, well, we should focus also on modernization, so solarization, prepaid meters, and then also household connections to increase our volumes. And this is nicely goes into what I think was said in the introduction. Whereas on the one hand, all the construction, you can do a lot to lower costs, so prepaid systems, solarization. But in the end, we're in a water business, so we really need to sell water. And that's where also more household connections come in, where there's a clear relationship between the amount that people consume and the closer the connection is to their home. At least that's what we have seen. So then the more household connections we have, it can also really increase our profitability. And if you go to the next slide, This resulted in quite a big discussion internally because it changed quite a lot of things for us. And one of the major things was that we had a whole discussion now internally on what does it mean to be a rural utility? If it's only the bigger systems that will be profitable, then what do we do with all those hand pumps and the smaller stations that were mostly on more difficult remote areas and people that have less means? And then the conclusion comes very well with the previous presentation where we said, well, if you want to reach those people and hand pumps and smaller station level, we really need to have money first. So we need to make a profit first, and then we can also operate those people that are have less means, and that does define us as a rural utility. So the discussion was, what does it mean for us to be a rural utility, and why are we not just a normal utility if we're just going to do bigger networks? And the conclusion was, we're not the only doing those bigger pipe networks. And what defines us as a rural utility is that we do all types of infrastructure so that everyone can reach, but we will need to make a profit first. So that's why our focus have been significantly on improving profitability through modernization, but also household connections, without forgetting all the hand pumps, the ones that we have already, of course, but really expanding that all those hand pumps and smaller pipe systems will really depend on our capacity to make a profit. So we can re-inject that on the loss-making parts of the business. To go a bit faster with all this is that we also said, well, we will need to diversify our revenue streams. Not that we do completely different things, but at least where can we make more margins so that we make a profit first? And that's where we have introduced a lot on carbon credits. This is for the long-term investments. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time, and also your return on the investments take time. But at least it will help us to have more of a solid business case. And then we are also more focusing on design and building because the margins on construction are just bigger. So while we remain, so these are really on the promotion of systems that are or contracts that do design, build, and operate, so that we make more margins on the design and the build part, and that can cover the losses that we'll have on the operational parts, especially in the beginning. This is an important one. So for very large contracts that we have, for example, in Benin, this has been a condition to actually get into those countries where we do a lot of operations. And this all doesn't mean, this all goes back to the political economy, I think. It is still important that governments and also financial partners understand those dynamics, so that we can also make financially sustainable contracts, that we can also sometimes discuss those tariffs, even if it's a complicated topic. But if there is no willingness, or if the people are not, or the government or the political economy is not open or not understanding those dynamics that make operating in rural areas quite complicated, it is not a country that we would invest in or decide to go and do operation and maintenance. We need an institutional framework that is open to this discussion. So these are our main lessons. I think it ties in nicely with all the other discussions that we had. So I'm happy to have any questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. So I think those are three fantastic presentations, and now we get to the more interactive part of the meeting. So if you have any questions or would like to put your own observations, then please just raise your hand. But while you're thinking of questions, as we want to get a bit of a dynamic discussion going, maybe James, is there anything you'd like to reflect on, having had those presentations now, coming back to you and some of the points you made at the beginning?
Yeah, thanks. I don't know, something is happening with my video. It's not showing at all. So for that, but I really like the last part, the sort of the conclusion in Alinta's uh, presentation, highlighting the fact that the focus not only on the large, big, in quotes, commercially viable raw water scheme, but really having the identity that a rural water utility is a utility that should be able to serve everyone, especially those remote areas, in the spirit of not leaving anyone behind. The practice we've seen, for example, here in Kenya, we have water utilities created by public water utilities created by government with the intention of serving rural areas, but they end up only providing their services in larger or smaller towns where there seems to be some profitability. So you leave a lot of the headache to smaller, far-flung communities that are not served. But if more private enterprise, private market-driven approaches can get in that space with the perspective, with the attitude that Alinta has mentioned, that you're coming in as a utility, rural utility. So you need to serve everything. So building a business model around that, cross-subsidization and specific result-based financing for the non-commercially viable, very far-flung remote areas, just to ensure that everyone is served, not leaving one behind. We don't only focus where you can make money, in quotes. So I really like that perspective, and really getting to the depth of finding business models that work from that. I had one big, just an example, squabble with one private operator here in Kenya, who was selling water very expensively. I think it was about $1 per cubic meters, but he made it very clear to me, we will only go do this where people can pay the $1. If our model cannot and will never work in rural areas, so our interests, we are only going to do our business in bigger, small rural towns. And that was a little bit troubling for me because it leaves a lot of people behind. I challenge them, can you find a business model that is inclusive, that serves everyone? So that point I really like, and I would like to hear perspective and experience of others in really driving models that leaves no one behind, that serves everyone in a more holistic approach. Thanks for that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic, thank you. So does anyone in the room, we're a small select group today, which is lovely. So this is different from our normal kind of public webinars where we have like 200-300 people. So there's much more of a organic space. So if anyone wants to has a point they'd like to make or a question, now is the time.
I hope you can hear me. I have two questions which I wanted to ask all the three presentations. Again, fantastic job. I think for me my key takeaway is I mean, from all the three presentations, it reflects what is possible if we sometimes allow the market forces in terms of demand and supply to also look at the market and see what then is the need and what then is the incentive or the appetite for people to invest in obtaining water services. Because sometimes, because the resource is small, we draw so much on the fact that people cannot afford and sort of restrict our ability to extend water services to people who really need it and are willing to set aside a portion of their meager incomes to be able to obtain this vital service. I wanted to reflect on two things. One, across all the three presentations, whether what sort of legal framework exists for tariff setting. Pricing is a key enabler if such enterprises can be viable in the longer term. And I was wondering whether within the areas where they operate, there are some legal requirements in terms of what pricing framework or regime can be applied, and whether some approvals will have to be sought before prices can be rolled out. The second piece has to do with, I see a number of them looking at eventually extending their water services to include direct pipe connections. And I'm wondering whether in all the cases, there's some sort of arrangement in place that ensures that their operational areas are not eventually taken over by larger scale utilities, which do so well in the major urban centers. So those are the two questions I want all the presenters to reflect on and share their experiences with us. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. Perhaps those are two great questions, but perhaps you can just introduce yourself so everyone knows who you are. Joe's being very humble.
Oh, you wanted me to introduce myself?
Yes, yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm Joseph Ampedu-Bwache, and I'm head of partnerships and business development at Safe Water Network. Safe Water Network is an NGO that invests in operating and managing safe water enterprises in peri-urban areas and small towns and rural communities. We currently have our operational footprint in Ghana and in India. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so from our speakers, who would like to come back on those 2 points about the legal frameworks that you're working in and the interaction with bigger utilities, maybe urban utilities? Would like to pick those up.
Can I begin? And
Sure.
then, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So in context of Nepal, there is some legal practices. I mean legal, clauses that governs tariff setting. For example, if the tariff has to be, if the tariff is being set for the utility that serves, let's say around 2,000 households, then they can make a decision at the local government level. So what happens is they need to have a business plan, and they need to have an evidence on how tariff is generated. So once the tariff is generated, the utility submits the proposal to the local government, and the local government reviews it, and based on the review they can authorize whether or not the utility can increase the tariff. If it's a bigger, if it's a bigger area, sometimes you might have a, area where the population is higher, but it still is a rural. So in such case we have a national tariff fixation committee. It has its own mandate. So every such tariff has to come, the proposal has to come to a federal level at the National Tariff Setting Commission. The commission reviews it, and only if the tariff commission approves it, they are allowed to increase the tariff. Otherwise, they will not be able to increase the tariff. Number two, in terms of how we work, how the smaller utilities work with the bigger utilities. What we have done in our case is, because the utility that we established is just 2 years old at the moment, so we kind of worked on a mentor-mentee relationship, where we link these rural utilities with the urban utilities who are kind of, like providing those mentorship. That could be, like a specific purpose. Like I remember one of the utility member telling me they have started a WhatsApp group where they can, like quickly ask questions with the urban utilities and then learn from them. Number one. Number two is that, we also initiated this not cross learning, but learning visits where the utilities go to the urban utilities and then learn their governance aspect, the technologies which they can then, like bring in. And we also did the cross learning between different rural utilities as well, not just urban and rural, but also with rural. So these are the ways that we have engaged, like with urban and rural, and also about the legality of tariff. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. No, that sounds wonderful. I love this idea of learning sort of mentor-mentee relationship or peer-to-peer exchange. I think this is something that my dream would be for RWSN to be doing that in every country. It's a bit fanciful, but it's that for me that would be awesome, because I think it's those kind of relationship building and exchange that just makes everyone stronger. Alinta, what's your experience?
Yes, I think it's a very interesting example from Nepal, because I work in most countries where it's not that organized, especially on the tariff setting. It's a very difficult issue, and I like to cite my CAO that always mentions on those conferences, a tariff is not something. A tariff is calculated. The cost of water is calculated. It's not something that you can just set. So I really appreciate this, the way that they do it in Nepal, because at least it sounds like if it's based on a business plan, whereas in many countries that we work with, it's something that is set beforehand. But it's a continuous lobby, I think, on how do you how do you work with local governments and national governments on this tariff. Now that we're getting bigger, this is one of the major criteria before we enter a new country, is how how is this organized, right? And is the tariff, if it's fixed, if it's something that we can really work with or not, based on the business plan that we develop. So it's not that we just go in and we'll see what we will find anymore. Whereas initially when we started, this was the case. We just went in. And then it's also based on the other part. It's the legal framework and the way that you work with urban utilities. For us, if we go into a country to do operations on a scale, then we have to have a contract that really protects us. So we cannot operate in a country where we have the risk of operating and maintenance, investing, because the reality is that as an operator, you very often come with funds to make sure to at least get the infrastructure on a certain level, and invest in those countries and then have the risk that someone else can take it. There is no, that the contracts need to be very clearly defined on this. So both depend very much on the legal framework of a country. And I can say, for example, in Mali, we still work where it's not very strong, but at least we have a 15-year contract that protects us for those 15 years. So also the length of this contract and the way you are protected as a rural operator are very important for us to move and invest in a country.
Brilliant, thank you. But there's a question that's come up in the chat box. But before we get to that, I just want to ask Jeremy that you're operating in a different space because you're not like a water operator like the other two presenters. But the role of regulation, because you're on the more consumer side of things, which is like a completely separate world of regulation. So maybe explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question because we are in a different space, but it's exciting to see countries actually stepping up to regulating some of the technologies and solutions, with WHO coming alongside for years and working closely with Ghana, example, to, for importing only quality things. There's been a lot of dumping over the years of safe water solutions that aren't really good solutions or long-term dependable solutions. And so being able to work with the authorities on some of those regulatory groups, KEBS, and there's lots of ways to get around them and lots of ways to work with them. And I think it's important to come alongside and work with them. And that's part of what we do on the legal side of things. Lots of countries are kind of the Wild West, and we can go in and bring any solution we want to. But creating dependability, and again, with a consumer-centric model, that what's dependable, what could be for them. And for a minute, I wanted to address, working with the larger scale, it is part of what we do. That dependability for the consumer, we come alongside of a lot of operators, and to create the dependability, some of them have been doing, and municipalities have been doing, an upcharge to provide a filter in the home that attaches to their tap. And so the municipality acknowledges that access isn't always means safe necessarily. We strive for that, obviously, but leakage, and we all know all the problems. And so being able to add value to their customer and add reliability, being consumer centric on that side, being able to supply a quality, legally established product to the home through the municipality, that they can charge a little bit more for that water by providing that. They can amortize over the cost of that over the lifespan of it. So it's pennies, on the bill that's added. It's an interesting way that we've dynamically tried to build trust with customers with a product, working with the supply chain network, because it is and does have to be both to create that dependability. So I'm not only paying for water, and I'm doing that and building that financial model, but I know it's dependable every time because I've got a technology with it. So it's been something we've interestingly added on to that.
Great, thank you. Now there's a question from Abby about carbon credits and certification process and stuff. We actually did a webinar on that. So actually, I would say that recently, so I would refer you back to that webinar on carbon financing, and maybe follow up directly with Alinta with specific questions, because Euphrasia has a question. So Euphrasia, please unmute and introduce yourself and ask a question.
Thanks everyone for the great presentation. It's been quite informative and also progressive on the things that we usually try to push for, especially in the African water sector from the perspective of consumer centrism, market-driven viable approaches, and also having politicians not being left behind. So my question is basically on the role of policy in your work. For all the years that you've been able to work in these countries, I'm just wondering how your work has been able to transform policy. For instance, for you, Jerem, have we been able to see probably maybe changes in taxation on imports of spare parts and supplies? For the work that is going on from the first presenter, I have forgotten their name, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, with all that evidence, how has it been able to probably inform policy to be a little bit different, probably on tariff or anything else? And then secondly, on the case of Mali, what happens to Mali generally? Will it be left behind, or what's going to go on? That's the last presenter. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. Elaine, did you want to respond to that last part, Marley?
Yes, I can do quickly the first part. So it's a difficult case, Mali, because in the end we're very loss-making there. But on the other hand, we don't want to give up on it. It's one of our, yes, it's a country where I invested a lot of time, energy, and where our heart lies. So it's very much on, we're trying to extend as much as possible into bigger systems. So we're looking into mostly systems that exist already and then try to make more profit from that. Our carbon credit things are also mostly based on what we have in Mali. So we're anticipating that it will make a loss for another year or two, and then we hope that that will also, because we're more cross-subsidizing among other systems, that it will also generate its own profit. But it remains a very difficult case with all this small infrastructure that we have, and with a governmental framework that's relatively weak. So whereas if we would restart, it would not be a country that we invest in anymore. But since we're now there anyway, we'll make it work.
Great, thank you. So I'm aware that we're getting to the top of the hour, but we anticipated this, and so we're around for another 30 minutes or so. So as the conversation's still going, so maybe we've got a hand up there from Jonathan or Jonathan. Sorry, don't know if it's a hard or soft J there.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jonathan Skongren. I'm Senior Water Advisor at LM International based in Nairobi. Thank you very much for a very interesting webinar, and also for pointing out that out of the 2 billion people that lack access to safe water, 1.4 billion is market ready and 600 million are under the poverty line. Sometimes in LinkedIn, etc. discussions, you get the impression that if you don't move into a market approach, you're kind of stupid. But that is not sometimes that narrative. Thank you for pointing that out. We work a lot in areas where the government is non-existent or very weak, and with the very poor communities, like in Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and we are very keen on moving into more like utility model and a little bit sometimes stuck how to take the next step. We are looking into project now with water mission in Uganda to have upgrading wash facilities in some of the refugee camps, while also doing livelihood activities to enable people to be able to pay the water fees. And Uganda has been quite proactive moving into utility approach. So I'm very curious to see how that would work. But in other areas where we don't see what from our colleagues here, what are your experiences like in the next step? If you have a very poor area, you have your water user committees, maybe you have some cash around, but very limited. We are discussing, could we make something like a very large water user committee that could be run as a utility, as like a small company, But I mean, there are a lot of obstacles into that. What are your experiences or recommendations from that? That would be very interesting to hear.
Great. Who would like to
And
answer that one?
okay, so so our experience, in Nepal has been, I think quite beneficial for Jonathan. So uh, uh, I wouldn't say in our area the government was very weak or non-existent, but somehow we struggled a bit because we were shifting from the community managed water supply model to more of a utility, and there were two different politics we had to manage. One is, the association of water user committee were not happy with that, so they did not want any utility to come in place. So there was a case where, local government who wanted to start utility had had a case pending in Supreme Court where the association had filed a complaint that these utilities actually trying to abolish the user committee. Number one, so we had to kind of navigate that political dynamics. So it took us 5 years to first convince the local government that, see, you cannot manage smaller water user committees, 20 or 50 or 60, and then keep on distributing pipes and pumps as per their need. You need to professionalize it. It took us 5 years to explain them and convince them, and it took us 3 years to form a legal act at the local level, because when Oxfam was working on that, there was no legal act at the rural level to form a utility. I mean, there was a broader national act but not the local act. So we spent 2.5 years, 3 years to form the act. And then it took us 2 years more to then kind of capacitate utility. And then, like I explained before, in 2 years the utility in the rural utility, where there was no history of having utility in those rural areas, have now 40% is coverage. And there is, we have a very beautiful journey. Probably we can share that somewhere in the next session sometime, so you can also connect with me. And today, if you ask me, there are organizations like UNICEF, Helbidas, and also the Municipal Association of Nepal actually inviting us to share our learning, and how we navigated from the user committee model to gradually to utility. So I think, Jonathan, I think it would be good to have a separate conversation on that, because it's a 6-7 years of struggle and journey. So I think it's this few minutes may not give it justice to that. So we can have a separate conversation and then share that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Brilliant. Thank you. Any other inputs on that? And from anyone in the room that wants to respond on any of these questions, actually. Otherwise, maybe Alinta, coming back to you to the question earlier from Abby about experience with carbon credits. Is there something you'd like to say on that process? Because I think we had other organisations presenting in the webinar the other week.
Well, I'd say I was happy that you put the question onto another webinar, because it's a big one and there's a lot to say about it. But so what I quickly wrote down when I saw the question is that I know it looks very so it's difficult to get in because it requires a lot of investment. It requires very high internal processes. Like your SOPs need to be very clear. You need to have very clear defined responsibilities, because your reporting level is so high. So it requires time and money and a lot of patience, because also when you go through the whole certification process and blah blah blah, it will still take some time before your credits actually generate revenue and you actually see the money on your account. So it's also not just a quick fix. So in our case, we had a donor that specifically looked for that wanted to make a lot of systems, and they are willing to help in this capital investment first. And they also helped us. They reached out for us to Global Water Center, that is really helping us on setting up during the whole procedures. But that's just going through the process like that is not as easy, and it's quite opaque and not as simple. Yes, even if you try to make it simple, it remains quite complex.
Great. Thank you. So your signal's breaking up there, but I think we got the gist of it. It's complicated. Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, there's two different things. I was going to jump back to something Jonathan said as well, around the funding different things. I always upset our accounting department because I think sometimes we work in silos with our margins of working in this country, and this country is attempting to get into the black and be net profit in this place. But in this place, we've got a great margin, and that's good. But a lot of times we break that model all the time, and our staff often is fully funded in one location, and our operations are fully funded in one place from a whole other area and a whole other region. And so, I mean, part of that conversation for us is looking where the margin is, and then utilizing that margin everywhere else. We don't have donors or grants within our system at all, and so we're always looking for where are the profitable markets that can fund the markets that we know that have to be subsidized, that we can take a market-driven approach as a company as a whole, but we can't sometimes take a market-driven approach truly at the rural level, at a supply chain level, where that local hardware store that has a solution, that has a part for a hand pump, they're going to have a very different economy scale. But they still need just as efficient of a system, and that system requires funding, requires staff, requires all those things. So being able to use that margin and break some of our silos for me, it's the accounting world of, we like to class things in certain areas or a region or by country. If we do that and stay in that way, we started that way. If we stayed that way, we'd have lots of places that are just in the red, that we can never expand in, that we can never really meet the end of the line. And you have to cross those, the wonderful gap method of accounting in the US that you're required to do. You have to cross some of those bounds and use your margin in one area for another area. So it gets a little complicated when I talk to my CFO. They always hate me, but
I can imagine.
but it has to be done because those funds have to be utilized to reach other areas.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Are there any other questions or inputs? Otherwise, we will wrap up for today. So if anyone wants to stick up their hand or put a question in the chat, I'm not seeing anything. So in that case, I just want to just remind everyone, thank you again to our silver members who joined us today. Thank you. Without you, doing events like this isn't possible in the current financial climate. And that for those that are with bronze organizations, please do consider upgrading to the next tier of membership, because the more you can support us to do events like this, I think we will kind of benefit from pooling our resources. So thank you again I would just like to thank the speakers who've been absolutely fantastic, and thank you as participants for joining today. And I would just like to give the final word back to James, and I'd also like to thank him for being a fantastic chair and for his words of wisdom. So James, final word to you, sir, to close things out today.
I'm sorry, my computer was hanging a bit, but I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you very much, colleagues, for joining. I think it is through as I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, we change policy and practice through reflecting on the practice, what's really coming from what we're doing at different parts of the globe. So thank you for coming in to share your reflections. I really hope that you've taken note, and the outcomes of such discussions will ultimately influence, how you organize your program, your intervention role, water supply space. So not much to add for me. And thank you, the Secretariat, for organizing this. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.